wasting time, allow me invite our next panelist, who is none other than Tichafa Chigaba. He's a Deputy Director, Financial Intelligence Unit. You're welcome.
Thank you. Allow me to present from. Thank you. So, by way of background, the Financial Intelligence Unit of Zimbabwe is established in terms of the Money Laundering and Process of Crime Act. The job of the FIU is to coordinate Zimbabwe's fight against money laundering, terrorism financing, as well as proliferation financing. That's our broad mandate. We do not discharge that mandate alone. As I said, we coordinate. We work very closely with institutions called accountable institutions. These are institutions like financial institutions, which are banks or non-bank financial institutions. We also work with institutions called designated non-bank financial DNFBPs. These DNFBPs include things like lawyers, accountants, casinos, real estate sector, and so forth. Those are DNFBPs. The duty of the accountable institutions is to monitor transactions, amongst others, and report suspicious activity to the Financial Intelligence Unit. These accountable institutions are supervised. The FIU remains the grant supervisor, but we work with supervisory authorities. For example, for the banks, they are supervised by the Reserve Bank's Bank Supervision Division. They supervise all the registrar of banks. They also supervise banks. The same applies to the insurance sector, supervised by Insurance and Pensions Commission of Zimbabwe. Securities sector also supervised by Security Exchange Commission of Zimbabwe, ETC. So those are the supervisors that we work with. Maybe fast forward to the NPOs, the NGOs. Where do you come in? The NGOs, they are not, in terms of, in Zimbabwe, the NGOs are not designated as accountable or reporting institutions. So you are not expected to submit any suspicious transactions to us. However, the FATF, which is the standard setting body, the global standard setting body, which issued the 40 recommendations, which we enforce in Zimbabwe, it has identified NPOs as being entities that are vulnerable to abuse by criminals for specifically terrorist financing. So NPOs are vulnerable to abuse for terrorist financing. So, in view, and this is not just Zimbabwe, this is a global position, you see. So, the obligations in terms of the law, in terms of recommendation 8 of the Financial Action Task Force, there are several obligations that NPOs have. The first one, NPOs are expected to conduct due diligence on donors and new employees. So it is important for NPOs to conduct due diligence on donors and new employees. The process of due diligence, it entails making initiatives to verify the identities of donors and employees upon establishing new relationships, as well as evaluating possible risks associated with these stakeholders. You see, so that is the obligation. Conduct due diligence to make sure that you are not abused for terrorism financing purposes. The second obligation is record keeping and documentation. NPOs are required to maintain accurate records, detailed records of financial transactions, including the receipt and spending of funds. This should be maintained to ensure compliance with the AML CFT regulations. Maintenance of such documentation is essential in demonstrating transparency and accountability. And it is also important for investigators if terrorism financing does happen. The law enforcement agencies will need to look at those records. The third obligation is the implementation of United Nations Security Council resolution targeted financial sanctions. I think my brother Mfunda did speak about that in his presentation. So, although NPOs are not designated institutions, they are encouraged to implement the United Nations Security Council, especially during the due diligence I was referring to. This is one place where you can check when you have a new donor to check whether they are not related to any terrorist organization that is designated by the United Nations Security Council. And this is very important because the consequences of terrorism, you know, they are devastating. So it's serious business, not playing. And if you are found, if you are eventually found, you just check Section 9 of the MLPC Act on the penalties for facilitating terrorism financing. They are very serious. So you are supposed to implement, and I'm happy my brother Mfunda here says on their website, on their portal, they are going to be posting, they have got a link of the United Nations Security Council targeted list. You see, that is very important. So whenever you do your work, you refer to that and check. In the FIU, we are also developing. Currently, what we are doing, we are checking the list every day, and we're issuing directives mainly to financial institutions to also. That obligation is not just for you, it's for everyone else who is involved in the value chain. So we are also developing a link. You can also check on our FIU website, check on the link and see whether the people you are dealing with are they listed on that sanctions list. So that's an obligation that is very important. So we also expect the fourth obligation, we expect NPOs to transact through regulated financial systems. NPOs are encouraged to transact through regulated financial channels as per this is the requirement of FATF recommendation 8. Why is it important? For record keeping purposes, for transparency purposes. If you transact through hawalas and other, you know, it's not allowed. You must transact through regulated financial channels. The fifth one, you need to develop NPO sector best practices. I'm happy you have been talking of self-regulation and other things and so forth through NANGO. So it's very important. You are encouraged to develop NPO sector best practices. So you are supposed to work together with the authorities in developing and refining best practice to address terrorist financing risk and thus protect yourselves from terrorist financing abuse. So that is the fifth obligation there. The sixth one, undertaking of TF risk assessment. So this one is usually done by the National Task Force, Zimbabwe's National Task Force on AML-CFT, championed by the FIU. So we do, every 2 years, we do a national risk assessment on the risk of terrorism financing. But we expect NPOs, we encourage them to participate in the process as well as understand the risks to which the individual institution is exposed to. So you have to understand the TF risk of the country. You also carry out some institutional risk assessment related to your institution, and you work closely. I must say, as it is right now, we're working very closely with NANGO in carrying out these risk assessments. We have also done an NPO risk assessment. It has not yet been adopted. We have been working closely with NANGO on the NPO risk assessment. But the findings of these risk assessments, NPOs are expected to be abreast to know the risk, so that you also, risk awareness is the beginning of proper risk management, you see. So the seventh one, we expect you to provide authorities with information on NPO administration and management. So according to the FATF recommendation 8.5, NPOs are obligated to cooperate and coordinate activities of information sharing and provide authorities with access to relevant information on the administration and management of NPOs, including financial and programmatic information, which may be required during an investigation if it does happen. And so that is our other obligation. Then the eighth one, you are obligated. In fact, in the past, every 10 years, the country would be subjected to a mutual evaluation exercise. This is a big audit on the country to see how you have been implementing the AML-CFT standards. So NPOs, as stakeholders, you are required to cooperate, to participate. So of course, you participate through invitation. So that is where you share your experiences on how we are working with the regulators in the fight against the terrorism financing and other issues. So you are expected to participate. In our next mutual evaluation is happening in 2026, 2027. That's when it will happen. And on the gaps, compliance gaps, I think those are the obligations. The compliance gaps so far, we've noted that there is a limited comprehension of TF risk assessments. Risk awareness is still limited, and we work together on extending and understanding of that through outreach programs. NPOs generally seem to be reluctant to participate in the TF risk assessment process. A few, if not none, have conducted own institutional terrorism financing risk assessments. Most NPOs do not know the extent to which they are vulnerable to terrorism financing risks and how they can mitigate such risks. The good thing about this gap is we work together to address this through outreach and awareness. We have also seen weak due diligence processes. NPOs often fail to implement robust know your customer processes, resulting in insufficient identity verification of employees, donors, and beneficiaries, which may lead to accepting or disbursing funds to and from high-risk sources and beneficiaries. NPOs often depend too heavily on external partners for compliance without conducting their own due diligence, which can expose them to risks associated with those partners' activities. The third, we have seen also weak internal controls. NPOs often have weak internal controls and policies to monitor financial transactions, and making it difficult to detect any terrorism financing activities. And we've also seen poor record-keeping practices. Inadequate record-keeping hinders an NPO's ability to provide necessary documents to the FIU or other regulatory bodies upon request. This may affect financial audit of TF or TF investigation and prosecution processes if it happens. The last one, limited engagement with FIU and other regulatory authorities. But I think here with the talk to the regulator, I'm sure we're already addressing that. So some NPOs do not actively engage with the FIU and regulatory authorities, or fail to stay updated on regulatory changes, which can result in non-compliance with evolving AML CFT requirements. In fact, NPOs always engage authorities on a defensive mode, but I'm sure now we are changing that, isn't it? So those are the compliance gaps, and the remedy to that, we're going to do a lot of outreach and awareness to educate you on the risk, as noted in the TF risk assessment, NPO risk assessment, and also we are going to come up with some guidelines on to make sure, because our job ultimately is to protect you from being abused. So we want you to help us to help you in protecting you. I think that is what the FIU is all about.
Platform FIU.